Hello, this is Dorie Clark, and you are joining us for another of our wonderful weekly sessions for Newsweek. It is our live stream Better, in which we interview talented authors, thought leaders, and business people to talk about ways that we tangibly can improve our lives. And today we're talking with Vanessa Van Edwards. The topic is how to decode behavior, yours and other people's, and learn how to understand them and ourselves better. Her new book just came out. It's called Cues, Master the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to decode some behavior. Let's do it.
Let's totally do it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to dig into, I know how carefully subtitles are chosen with these things. Talk to me about charismatic communication. Why is that word in there? What does it mean? I know there's lots of debate. Can we enhance our charisma? Is it innate? What can we do? Tell me why that word is in there and what it means to you, Vanessa.
Yes, so it's very personal to me. I'm a recovering awkward person. And so charisma never came naturally to me. I have a little trouble processing social information. And so that always made me feel out of place, overwhelmed. And I always was misinterpreting cues. So very early on, I realized I would misinterpret neutral cues as negative. So that was very challenging because I would leave any dinner party or meeting or interview, and I would turn to my partner and I would be like, he hated me, right? Like totally messed that up. He'd be like, what are you talking about? It was totally fine. So I thought because of this affliction that charisma was innate, right? You either were born with it or you weren't. And I was so happy to learn, which we can talk about, that thank goodness, charisma can be learned and that there's actually specific traits and cues that highly charismatic people use. And I noticed when I started this research 17 years ago, dating myself, I started this research 17 years ago, and I found that highly charismatic people, and it didn't matter if they were business leaders or politicians or athletes or celebrities, they tended to use the same set of very specific cues. And I wondered, well, if I can't naturally read these, maybe I could code them. Maybe I could catalog them. Maybe we could create a glossary for the charisma cues, along with the cues that the bad actors use, right? The dupers, the fibbers, the people who are in guilt or shame. Could we learn the good ones and the bad ones and then try to begin to use them ourselves?
So interesting. I think everybody wants to know what they are, Vanessa. But before we dive into them, I want to welcome some of the great folks who are tuning in to join us from around the world. If you're just joining us, type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you are dialing in from. And also, we're taking your questions for Vanessa Van Edwards. Her new book is called Cues, Master the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication. So we wanted to say hi to Flavia, who's here. Sushma is here from India. We have Adnan from Turkey. Scott's here from Baltimore. Aiko is here from Los Altos. We've got Nathaniel from Austin. He's waving to you from across the street there.
I love a wave.
That's where she is.
I love a wave. Yes.
So good. Robert's here from Berlin. Steve from Nairobi. We've got Yasmina from Paris and Belinda from Fort Myers. Marcia from Phoenix. We have a LinkedIn user from Brazil. Donato from Sao Paulo. Alex from San Francisco. We are so glad to have all of you, and we're taking your questions for Vanessa Van Edwards. Okay. So Vanessa, you tantalized us with these clues about the charisma cues that people are using. Now, I think when a lot of people think about charismatic leaders, maybe they think of things that often they're almost the things that get like parodied on Saturday Night Live, right? Like Bill Clinton with "I feel your pain," and we've got Oprah with a so I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming that this is not precisely what you mean by a charisma cue, but tell us, give us one or two examples of the kind of charisma cues that you have been coding and analyzing.
Okay, so it's funny that you mentioned those two. So this is the thumb pinch, Dorie. This is the thumb pinch. So this is a very specific cue. This is one of the cues in the book. So what's interesting about a thumb pinch is not necessarily a charisma cue. And you also mentioned Oprah, right? So what do these two cues have in common? So this and this. So those are both gesture cues. And one thing that highly charismatic people do is they are very purposeful with their movement. So I thought this was really interesting in the research. Is I was also looking for, should I be walking around doing this when I give interviews, right? Like, should I be like Oprah and be like, and you are charismatic, and you are charismatic. So there is a little bit of truth to this, in that people who are very highly charismatic are purposeful with their gestures, and they know that their gestures aid their listeners. So charismatic people, what's really exciting about charisma is it's contagious. So the reason we like to be around magnetic, compelling people, the reason we're drawn to them, is because we want to catch their charisma. They make it easy for us to listen to them. They make it easy for us to communicate. And gestures, so those are two examples of how they make it easy. The reason for this is researcher Susan Goldwyn Meadow. She wrote a beautiful book called Hearing Gesture, where she researched how do gestures help us as listeners and speakers. She found two things. One is that the more we use purposeful gestures, the more fluent we are as speakers. And if you just try this, by the way, if you try to tell your most embarrassing story sitting on your hands, it's really hard. It's like taking away one of your ways to communicate. So the more purposeful gestures we use, the more fluent we are, the more eloquent we sound. Second, gestures lower our listeners' cognitive load. So for example, if I were to say, I have 3 different ways that I want to talk about this, your brain goes like, oh, I just got an outline. Great. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I'm ready for the next one. That makes you follow along with me easier. It makes me easier to understand. If I say, today, Dorie, I have a really big idea. It's huge, massive, really big. You look at this and you're like, no, Vanessa, I can see how small it is. It's not very big. And that's because research has found that we give more weight to our gestures, because our gestures tend up to be more honest. Really highly competent people, they can speak to you on 2 tracks. They can speak to you with their words and their hands. All that to say, the very first big charismatic gesture I like to teach is being purposeful with your gestures. So for you, if the thumb pinch feels natural, that when you're making an important point and trying to hit that really solidly, maybe you want to use a thumb pinch if that feels natural to you. It's not one of my favorites. It's not one of my recipes. Or maybe when you're saying something really big and you're on stage and you want to say, this is a big idea. Maybe that feels natural to you. The most important thing here is highlighting your important points. And it is like a nonverbal highlighter. If you have something that you want someone to remember or understand a little more deeply, you can literally, I didn't even realize I was doing that gesture. It was happening accidentally, but that sort of shows that this is a sort of a specific point. Or you could have the number 3 or 5. You can talk about big or small. So it's just about being purposeful with our gestures. And I think that Clinton and Oprah are very good examples. They are very purposeful with how they broadcast their charisma, not only for themselves, but also others.
Fantastic. Vanessa
That was
Van
a long
Edwards is
answer.
here. No, we're
Okay.
eating it up. This is great. Thank you very much. We're here with Vanessa Van Edwards. If you want to learn more about her and her work, go to scienceofpeople.com. The new book is Cues, Master the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication. And if you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button so that your friends and colleagues can benefit from the discussion as well. So, Vanessa, a question came in. I think this is probably of interest to a lot of folks. One of our LinkedIn users wants to know about how charisma plays out differently for males and females. Are there sort of gender codes around what makes somebody charismatic?
Thank goodness. And the research actually looked at this. There are no differences between the definition of charisma between men and women. However, with different genders, we can have different defaults. So here's how they define charisma. And this is why we'll begin to understand some of the nuances. So researchers out of Princeton University, this is Dr. Susan Fisk, groundbreaking research. She wanted to know what actually makes someone charismatic. Like, what are the different traits? And she found that the way that we can define charisma is that highly charismatic people have the perfect blend of warmth and competence. It doesn't matter across cultures, races, genders, ages. Everyone who is highly charismatic hits a sweet spot of high warmth and high competence. Here's the reason for this. When we're interacting as humans, we want to know 2 things about someone. Can I trust you? And can I rely on you? Those are the 2 most important things we have to know. And so people who are highly charismatic are broadcasting cues of trust, warmth, collaboration, openness, and at the very same time, competence, power, efficiency, capability. The problem is the reason why not everyone hits that sweet spot is most of us have an imbalance, that we are higher in either warmth or competence. And so there's some of the risks. So for high in warmth, people really like spending time with you. You're considered a cheerful communicator or a very supportive communicator. But the problem is oftentimes if you're high in warmth, you can struggle with people pleasing. You can have people interrupt you or not take your ideas seriously. And that's because people like you, but they might not have that competence to respect you. And that, by the way, this is all about your cues, right? So you could be the warmest, most competent person in the world. But if you're not sending off the right cues, people can't grasp that. They don't know that inside of you. On the other side, you have people who are off the charts in competence. Competent folks are taken very seriously. They're seen as being very powerful. However, the high competence folks can be seen as cold, intimidating, hard to talk to. And this was the quote in the study that gave me chills. What Dr. Fisk found was that if you have competence without enough warmth cues, it leaves people feeling suspicious. And this is the problem that very smart people have, is that they're brilliant ideas. They're so smart, but without the warmth cues to support those ideas, it's as if people can't trust your competence. And so my mission today and with this book is to help people have the cues to show both their natural instincts for warmth and competence so people can trust and rely on them.
Really interesting. Vanessa Van Edwards is here. She's the author of the new book, Cues. And we want to say hi to the great folks who are tuning in. If you're just joining us, type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from. Aaron's here from New Zealand. We have Anna Maria from Canada. Ulf is tuning in from Vienna. Nancy from Boston. Kara is already leaning in. She just bought the book Cues. So good job, Kara. That's awesome. Holly's from the lower Hudson Valley. We have Julie from Las Vegas. Jamal also from Austin, your neighbor. Larry is here. Tanya from Sacramento. We have a LinkedIn user from north of Boston. And we have Moloko from Lesotho and Japar from Zurich. Welcome, everyone. We're very glad to have you. So a great question came in for you, Vanessa, from Annette. Annette's in Southern California. She wants to know, you've got, speaking of intentional clues and cues that you're leaving, actually this is a very good question, but this is not the question that I wanted, because Annette had another question. Here we go. She says, your map, look at your map. What are the global norms and customs that relate to charisma, to social cues, et cetera? What do we need to know about operating in an international environment?
Okay, well, first of all, Annette, thank you for this question, because this is a cue. So there are four, while we talk about we dive into the mechanics of cues, there are 4 different channels that we cue people. The first one is nonverbal. So our body language, our facial expressions, our gestures, our posture. The second one is vocal. So how we deliver our cues, and I would love to talk about this with you, Dorie, as well, as our volume, our pace, our cadence, our tone. Vocal is the next mode. Then we have words, verbal. So verbal, I actually put it at the end of the book because I think we focus too much on our words. So I wanted people to get that one last. And the last one is imagery. Imagery are the props in your backgrounds, in your profile pictures, what you hold in your profile pictures, the colors you wear, the ornaments you wear. Imagery are important cues. So thank you for noticing my cue. I just switched that one out. So yes, what's interesting is there are absolutely cultural cues, but a lot of the biological reasons that we cue people are the same. I'll give you an example. Actually, we'll talk about gestures. We already talked about gestures. So across genders, races, and cultures, we gesture to express ideas. However, the amount of gesturing that is appropriate is different based on your culture. For example, my Italian friends, they gesture so much they knock over their glasses, right? That's a good conversation, right? If you knock something over, it's a good conversation in Italy. Whereas some of my Japanese friends, they gesture a lot less. So gestures are still the mechanics of expressing our ideas visually, but how much we use that is different from culture to culture. Same with space, same with touch. We have 4 different space rules. Touch for humans universally produces oxytocin, doesn't matter the culture. However, the amount of appropriate touch and where we can touch is a little different from culture to culture.
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much, Vanessa. So we want to say hi to new folks who are tuning in. We're so glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Welcome. Please, if you're interested in learning more and never missing one of our weekly Newsweek shows, you can go to dorieclark.com. You can sign up, get a free self-assessment. You'll be added to the email list, and you will get reminders about these conversations. But we wanted to say hi and greet some of the wonderful folks here. Jamari is here from Panama. Gail is here from North Carolina, Dikran from Washington, Stephen from Nairobi, Jackie from Leeds. We have Vashmi Jahan from Baku is joining us. We have Jen from Boston, Tiziana from Italy, Anna from Chicago, Maureen from coastal New Jersey. I love that. Susan from Arizona, Tevin from Scotland. So many great friends. LinkedIn user from Mexico, Donato from Sao Paulo, Vipin from India, Zulima from Mexico, Javad from Iran, Ignacio from Mexico, Janice from Denver, Todd from New York, Ritix from Angola, and many more. We're glad to have all of you. Please hit like and share if you want your friends to be able to benefit from Vanessa's insights. Now, Vanessa, something that I'm curious about, you were alluding to this earlier, that there's a fundamental challenge. If we want to be seen as charismatic, we need to have high warmth and high competence. This can be a tough balance. So if I am somebody who is somehow out of balance, if my warmth is great, but people aren't sure if I'm competent, or if everybody knows I'm competent and the warmth is not so much, and then therefore people are suspicious, what is one action that I could take to correct either of these imbalances? It's not, you seem to be implying it is not a permanent state of affairs. This can be fixed. What do we need to do to right the ship?
Yes. Okay. Actually, and you mentioned something important. This is not permanent. And that's a good thing, right? First impressions are important and they're lasting, but we're actually making these charisma assessments every single time we interact. So even if you're interacting with colleagues on a regular basis, you've been on meeting after meeting, you can kind of reset for this meeting or reset for this video call. So don't worry if you feel like, oh, I have to totally change all my first impressions. Yeah, we can slowly dial that up. So the way that I like to think about cues is kind of like cooking. And this is because there are 96 different cues that we can choose from. And those are like different ingredients that we can use. And we actually don't want to use the same recipes as everyone else. There are different flavors of charisma. So not everyone has to be the bubbly extrovert, right? Some people could be the quiet, contemplative introvert. We also have nurturing healers, right? So we have different flavors, and that's a good thing. So the very first step is I want you to begin to try on the cues that you know you need more of. So warmth cues. Here's some of my favorite warmth cues. If you think I think that maybe I need to dial up my warmth. I've been told I'm intimidating, or I feel like I'm not connecting with people, or I feel like I want to make deeper connections. You want to try on some of these warmth cues. And I do mean try on, right? Just like we taste test an ingredient, I just want you to taste test some of these cues, because some are going to feel natural and good for you. And some you're going to be like, oh no, not my flavor. Like, don't like it, right? So, okay, some warmth cues I love. The very first universal warmth cue, and this one's universal, is a head tilt. So this makes sense from a biological reason. When we want to hear something better, we tilt our head to expose our ear. We go, what? Can I hear that? Even dogs do that, right? They go up and they like tilt their head over to the side. So that is a universal gesture of I'm listening. When research has found that when you are listening or giving hard news with a head tilt, it softens. It literally shows, I know this is hard, but I'm still listening. So you could try on your video calls in person, adding a little head tilt. That's a warmth cue. Another warmth cue is the slow triple nod. So, Now, note, I'm not bobbleheading, right? So bobbleheading
You
is too
don't
much.
just keep doing it.
Right. That's too much warmth, right? So not bobbleheading, it's a slow triple nod. Remember how we talked at the very beginning that charismatic people are really purposeful with their gestures. So a slow triple nod. Now, nodding is one of the cultural ones. So in India and in Bulgaria, and I actually make notes of each of these in the book, nodding is a little bit different. In Western cultures, we know a vertical nod is a yes and a horizontal nod is a no. So a slow triple nod means you're listening. It's a great warmth cue. Beware of a fast nod. So look at the difference. A slow nod means I'm listening, I'm engaged. A fast nod means impatient. I got it. Hurry up. Watch the difference. So versus So be careful that fast nod actually can get people to wrap up faster if you need that. Not that you would ever need that, but that can happen. So those are a couple of warmth cues. On the competence side, so if you want to dial up competence, one of my favorite competence cues, this is a really weird one, Dorie, but I love it. I love it. I
Tell
love it.
us.
Okay. It sounds small, but there's a biological reason we make this cue, and it's so powerful. So when you harden your lower lid, so I want you to harden your lower lid at me. Let me see. Yep, great job. Yep. So just try this with me if you're watching. Just harden your lower lid. You will begin to feel like you're really thinking deeply. You're really scrutinizing. And that's because there's a biological reason for this. When we are afraid or surprised, we widen our eyes, we raise our eyebrows, and we try to take in as much as possible. When we're trying to discern, see details, we harden our lower lid. That reduces the amount of light that can come into our eye, which allows us to see more details. So if I were to ask you to, can you see that all the way over there? You would, lightly just harden your lower lid or squint. We recognize this in conversation as deep listening or intensity, right? So if you are in a conversation, you want to show you are deeply listening. You're not wide-eyed, right? This is a danger zone cue. Danger zone cue is neither warm nor competent nor charismatic. It means that you look a little bit nervous. This is the worst way to be in a meeting, right? Like people are going to be like, "Are you okay? Everything's fine."
Yeah, that would be
So
alarming.
yeah, so the opposite of that is I see what you're saying. Now, that lower lid flex, you have to watch out for it too. So it shows intensity. You don't want to hold it for too long, right? Like I want you to use it authentically. So when someone says something you really like, competent folks, they want to see details. I got it. Interesting, right? So you're authentically using it to highlight something. It also, you can watch out for it as if someone's holding it and you just mentioned something important in your presentation or your sales pitch, that could be a moment to clear something up. So if I'm in a presentation and I see someone do this when I get to a chemical or a scientific research experiment, I might say, does that make sense? Are we all good? Can I break that down any further? So it can also be a way it can activate your competence by asking the right question at the right time. It can show there's some deep thinking going on. And that's we love that with our competent folks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We're here with Vanessa Van Edwards. This is our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. It takes place every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. You can tune in every week. Vanessa is the author of the new book, Cues, Master the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication. We're talking about all the ways we can decode behavior. We want to say hi to some of the great friends tuning in and joining us. Patricia's here from Orange County. We have Eugenia from Costa Rica. We have Brown Elk from Atlanta. We have a LinkedIn user from Mexico, Maria Clara from Brazil. Jennifer's here from Toronto, Deirdre from Buenos Aires, and Tara from tiny Green Lane, Pennsylvania. I'm not insulting Green Lane. She says tiny Green Lane, Pennsylvania. So welcome to all of you. So Vanessa, I think that your map is a hit and it is inspiring some questions. Susan wants to know, okay, let's talk visual cues, Vanessa. Are there certain colors for your background? Everybody's obsessed with Zoom calls now. Are there certain colors for your background wall that will help increase warmth or demonstrate competence? This is an important question for me as well, because in theoretically 2 weeks, assuming there's not supply chain mishigas, I am going to be getting a new painting behind me. So I'm not going to tell you what color it is because hopefully you're not going to say like, oh, that's the worst story. But we'll see. Give us the 411.
Okay, first of all, there are no right or wrong cues, and that's the nice thing. It's all purposeful, right? So it depends on your goals. So there's never right or wrong. I would never tell you, Dorie, that you were wrong. By the way, this part of this question, when we're talking about visual cues in our background, I think Jackie asked, how often do we see these in video calls? Let's talk about video calls specifically for a second, because your background really does matter, especially in your video calls, because we're reducing the amount of communication that we can get, right? So on a video call, all we're seeing is this much of our body. There's no spacing. We can't touch. And so every other cue is sort of heightened. I think this is why we can get burnt out from video calls so quickly, is because our brain is working extra hard to try to get all the cues from the person we're talking to. So a couple video cues, and then I will definitely talk about background and color, but I want to work us up to it, which is the very first mistake that people cue incorrectly. I'm not supposed to say wrong, that people accidentally cue, and I want you to be purposeful with it, is that we get too close to our camera, especially in the first 10 seconds. So the ideal spacing is actually matching the ideal spacing of real life. So in real life, there are 4 different space zones: intimate zone, personal zone, social zone, and the public zone. And you want to make sure what happens on camera is we accidentally, can you see me? Can you hear me? Right? And all of a sudden we're close talkers, right? So in person, you would know, if you've seen the Seinfeld episode, you would know not to get this close to someone's face, right? It would be you would be a close talker. But on camera, we tend to forget it. So unless you want to be intimate, then it's a correct cue. If you don't want to be intimate right away, and I do mean intimate, like intimate, then I want to make sure that you are at least 18 inches away from your camera. So I want to measure, if you can, I want you to get out a ruler or a measuring tape. And I want you to measure the distance between your nose and your camera. Are you 18 inches?
Am I doing this right? Does this seem 18 inches or?
You're perfect. I think you're perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Dorie, if you were to get this close, it would be too much.
It's alarming. Yeah.
It's alarming. So, and what's funny, again, there's biological reasons. If someone's that close to us, it raises these alarm bells of, oh no, they're in our intimate space. So that's the first thing, is make sure in your video calls, before your background even comes up, is that you're at least 18 inches away from your camera. Second, backgrounds. So I really like backgrounds that are going to help you. So this background, I was telling Dorie before we started that I used to have my favorite chemicals behind me: dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. They were very sciencey, and I noticed it was doing 2 things. One, it was intimidating people who didn't like science. And I can convince anyone to like science because I share the science in a much more fun way than your 5th grade science class, I promise. So I think people gave me feedback that they were intimidated. It was actually too much competence. And this is really important, is I think that if we have too much competence, even in our props, this could be certificates, this could be awards. For me, this was accidentally having science behind me. That was not a balance. The other thing that was happening is I like addressing cultural and universal differences. And I was getting these questions by the end of the presentation. Oh, does this count in different cultures? And I'd say, oh, of course it does. And I was like, I wish I had addressed that right at the beginning. So by adding the map, it has triggered those discussions in a really purposeful way. Colors. So you'll notice I'm black and white, right? So I'm black and white. That is because I want to focus a lot on the content. In the color psychology, by the way, is a little bit pseudoscience, just to be very, very honest about it. So it's really, really hard to find universal associations to color. That's the reason why it's hard. However, we can think about some biological reasons that we associate things with colors. Red, so for all humans through evolution, red is typically the color of alarm. When we see a red berry, it's ready to pick. We want it, right? It's a color that precedes motivation. When someone gets red, they're either flushed in anger or blushed in embarrassment, which makes us pay attention. So red is often an attention-grabbing color. That is the reason we went with red for cues, is I was like, I want to call attention. It was different, by the way. We decided not to use any red on my last book, which was all blue. And the reason for that is because blue is often associated with like a blue sky. And for humans, when it was a blue sky day, it meant I can grow crops today. I can go outside, I can hunt. And so those thoughts are sort of, they trigger an internal evolutionary response. So red for attention. If you want to grab attention, I love it. Blue is typically more calming. It means, this is going to be a good day. Green and yellow, they have trouble making universal associations with these, but yellow typically reminds us of sunshine or the sun. It's a high energy color. It also has a higher frequency. So that's great for grabbing attention, like better. Better is in yellow, which is like positive, and then green is a hard one because research has found that this association is changing. It's often associated with nature, with lush, with refreshing, with spring, right? But recently it's been used on so many eco-friendly products that now our association is changing to climate and eco-friendly. So what's your painting color going to be? I want to know.
It's orange.
What? You broke the algorithm. You broke the algorithm. A beautiful high energy color. Some folks say that like that's the most high energy color, that you should wear it when like you're trying to get pumped up. So I like it. I like it.
Thank you. Well, this is
Like
yet
it.
another reason to keep tuning into Better every Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, because in approximately 2 weeks, maybe three, let's be honest, you are going to see the amazing new orange painting. This is fantastic. We are basically out of time, Vanessa Van Edwards. This is so awesome. And thank you so much
Oh,
for this great conversation. We just want to greet some of the wonderful friends who have tuned in to join us. Again, last chance, hit the like and share button so your friends can benefit. Mariano is here from Barcelona. We have Raluca from Romania, Carlos from Georgia, not the nation, the state. We have Sydney from Brazil, Servan from Istanbul. We're so glad to have all of you here. Vanessa Van Edwards, your website where people can check you out is scienceofpeople.com. The new book is Cues, The Secret Language of Charismatic Conversation. Do you have any closing remarks or important reminders to leave people with as we part?
yes. And it is this. There are multiple flavors of charisma. You should never fake it till you make it. I do not think anyone has to pretend to be more extroverted than they are. This is all about honing your natural good intentions and your natural competence. And so my goal is for you to figure out what is your unique blend of charisma and how you can hone that and own that.
Love it. Vanessa Van Edwards, author of the new book, Cues. So great to have you here. Thank you all for joining us. And Vanessa, thanks for being our guest.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care and see you next week.